Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. Today we're going to look at one of the strangest stories in the Old Testament, one that I guarantee you didn't have in Sunday school. I know you didn't. Before we do that part, let's look at the part that's a little bit easier. First of all, you got to keep in mind that Moses his life breaks down into 3 40s really neatly. 40 years he lives in Pharaoh's palace. For 40 years he's out in the wilderness and raises a family and raises sheep. And then the last 40 years of his life he leads a nation as they leave Egypt. God had called him, and as he's going back to Egypt, we have this scenario in Exodus chapter 4, beginning at verse 21. And Yahweh said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles which I have put in your power, but I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go. And you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says Yahweh, Israel is my firstborn son. Israel is my firstborn son. Somebody else in the New Testament would occupy that position. And it's no accident that Jesus repeats much of old Israel's history. Jesus, the new Israel, God's firstborn son, would do what old Israel was called to do, and he would be what old Israel should have been. Then you come to the weird part. Chapter 4, verse 24. At a lodging place on the way, Yahweh met him and sought to kill him. Why would God call Moses to go lead his people out of Egypt and then try to kill him along the way? And we don't really know what that means. Does it mean Moses got deathly ill? Or does it mean God physically had him by the neck? Or what's going on here? But in some way, God made it very clear to Moses that Moses was in dire straits. Then Zipporah is his wife, took a flint knife and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. Apparently the problem in the text, is that Moses had not had his own son circumcised, had not followed the guidelines or the laws of circumcision that had been passed down from family to family. In his own family, he hadn't done that. Zipporah takes the role of circumcising her own son. We aren't told how old that son is, but remember, Moses has been in the wilderness for 40 years, so that son is probably not a little baby, and maybe didn't take to the circumcision real willingly. And Zipporah circumcises her son, takes the foreskin, and throws it or touches it to either Moses' feet, or sometimes feet in the Old Testament is a euphemism for genitals. Zipporah, not a Hebrew, apparently finds this whole circumcision process abhorrent. And she kind of loses it. And her line is, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he let him alone. He, being God, probably let Moses alone. Then it was that she said, you're a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision. There's a lot we don't know in that text, but there is some that we do know. We do know the importance of circumcision in the Old Testament. Circumcision as a way of entering into God's family. And the New Testament, of course, makes that parallel to baptism. That baptism in the New Testament is the way that we enter into God's family. God was very concerned, evidently, that Moses have his own family in order before he tried to lead God's larger family out of Egypt.